On April 21st, 2025, Pope Francis passed away at the age of 88. And that event, as I'm sure you know, sets in motion a really fascinating process, the election of a new pope.
Uh-huh.
In this deep dive, we're going to unpack the whole papal conclave procedure. We've got a lot of great material, some you sent in and other sources we've pulled together.
Yeah, absolutely. To give everyone a complete picture of what's likely to happen in the coming weeks, we've gathered quite a bit. We've looked at the Chronicle of Papal Conclaves, spanning the 18th to 21st centuries,
Right.
analysis from the Uruguayan Episcopal Conference on recent conclaves, an electomania piece on this specific election after Francis, expert views on canon law from Ius Canonicum,
Okay.
the book Papal Elections from Disclay to Brouwer, info-based look at potential candidates, details on the Apostolic Constitution, University Dominici Gregis from Wikipedia, an Articulo 14 explainer, and even a transcript from a really helpful YouTube video by Memorias de Pez.
That's quite a list. So our mission today is pretty clear. Lay out a roadmap for the timeline, the key figures, the procedures, and, the dynamics we might expect in the upcoming conclave.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to walk away with a really clear, engaging understanding of this major event, keeping in mind what history tells us. So let's start at the very beginning. What happens right when the Pope dies?
Okay, so immediately, the sede vacante is declared. Literally, the Apostolic See becomes vacant.
Right, empty.
Exactly. At that moment, the government of the Holy See is, temporarily suspended. A key figure here is the Camerlengo in 2025. That's Cardinal Kevin Farrell.
Okay.
He takes over the temporary administration, and part of his duties include some very symbolic but significant acts like the destruction of the Ring of the Fisherman and the Papal Seal.
Wow, yeah, definitely loaded with symbolism. And what else happens in those first few days after the sede vacante is declared?
Well, the College of Cardinals convenes for what are called general congregations, basically meetings. All cardinals who aren't legitimately prevented have to attend.
Uh-huh.
It's worth remembering, though, that cardinals over 80 who can't vote in the conclave itself, they can choose not to attend these meetings if they wish.
I see.
These congregations usually go on for about, say, 10 to 15 days. And during this time, the cardinals discuss the state of the church, the challenges it's facing, things like secularization, abuse scandals, geopolitical tensions.
All the big issues.
Right. And they start to, informally size up potential candidates. These meetings are really crucial for setting the tone and figuring out what issues will carry the most weight inside the conclave.
Gotcha. And while all that's happening, I imagine looking back at past conclaves gives us some pretty interesting context, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you look back, the first thing that jumps out is just how much the length of conclaves has varied.
Yeah.
The longest one in modern history was way back in 1740, the one that elected Benedict XIV. It lasted a staggering 181 days.
181 days? Wow, that's nearly half a year.
It really is.
Yeah.
There were 51 cardinal electors, and amazingly, 4 of them actually died during the process. It just gives you a sense of the intensity and, the complexity that can surround these elections sometimes. But then you have the complete opposite super quick conclaves, like Pius XII's in 1939, resolved in just 2 days.
That's an incredible contrast. Almost 6 months versus 2 days. It really highlights how unpredictable this whole thing can be.
Exactly.
Were there other sort of historical oddities worth mentioning?
Definitely. For instance, the conclave that elected Pius VII between 1799 and 1800 was actually held in Venice.
Outside Rome?
Yeah, the last time it happened outside Rome is because Napoleon was occupying the city at the time. Only 34 electors took part in that one. We also have examples of other pretty lengthy ones. Clement III took 53 days in 1758. Clement XIV took 94 days in 1769. And Pius VI needed 133 days between 1774 and 75.
Okay.
And on the short end, besides Pius XII, you've got Pius IX in 1846 and Leo III in 1878, both wrapped up in just 3 days. This huge variation just shows the different dynamics over time.
It really is a historical roller coaster. Now, tell me about the famous ius exclusivae, the right of veto.
Ah, yes, the veto power. This was basically a right that some major Catholic powers claimed, allowing them to block a candidate they didn't like.
Political interference, essentially.
Pretty much. It was last used in 1903. Emperor Franz Joseph the Race of Austria vetoed Cardinal Mariano Rampolla. The conclave ended up electing St. Pius X instead.
Right.
And actually, one of Pius X's first big decisions was to abolish that imperial veto power altogether. A really significant step in asserting the church's independence in the election process.
No doubt, a crucial move for autonomy. And how have the rules governing the conclaves themselves evolved over time?
There have been several important changes, mostly aimed at ensuring, transparency and the freedom of the electors.
Mm.
After the 1922 conclave, they formalized that 15-day period after the sede vacante begins, giving cardinals more time to actually get to Rome.
Okay, that makes sense, especially for those traveling further.
Exactly. And a more recent, very significant change was excluding cardinals over the age of 80 from voting in the conclave. That rule first came into effect in 1978.
Right, I remember that.
The idea is basically to ensure the electors have, well, the necessary energy and clarity for such a demanding task.
All this history definitely provides valuable context for the upcoming conclave, which we expect, within 15 to 20 days of Pope Francis's passing?
That's the time frame, yes.
Yeah.
It will be held, as is traditional, in Vatican City, with the Sistine Chapel as the main location.
The iconic setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For 2025, the estimate is around 130 cardinal electors, those under 80, at the time the sede vacante began.
Okay.
During the conclave, these cardinals will live in the Domus Sanctae Marthae residence. But crucially, they are completely cut off from the outside world once it begins.
Total isolation.
Total isolation. No mobile phones, no internet access. Any unauthorized communication is strictly forbidden. They even sweep the Sistine Chapel meticulously for any hidden recording devices.
Wow. That isolation really underscores the seriousness and, I guess, the sacredness of the moment, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Complete isolation to ensure maximum freedom of conscience and decision-making.
So how does the conclave officially kick off?
It formally begins with a solemn mass, the Missa pro elegendo pontifice, the mass for the election of the Roman pontiff held in St. Peter's Basilica.
Right.
Then, usually in the afternoon, the cardinal electors process into the Sistine Chapel. There, they take an oath, swearing to maintain absolute secrecy about everything that happens inside.
The famous oath.
Exactly. Then the master of pontifical liturgical celebrations gives the order extra omnes.
For everyone out.
Precisely. And the huge doors of the chapel are closed and sealed, leaving the cardinals alone to undertake the immense task of choosing the next successor of Peter.
And then begins the voting process itself, which is also steeped in its own ancient rules and rituals, isn't it?
Correct. The voting is done using secret ballots. Each cardinal writes the name of his choice on a rectangular card, pre-printed with the Latin words ego elego in summum pontificem.
I elect a supreme pontiff.
That's it. They then write the name underneath. There can be up to 4 ballots each day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon.
Oh.
After each round of voting, or usually after each pair of morning or afternoon votes, the ballots are burned in a special stove set up for this purpose. If no one has been elected, chemicals are added to make the famous fumata nera black smoke, signaling to the world outside that there's no pope yet.
The iconic image from St. Peter's Square.
Absolutely.
Right.
If, however, a pope is elected, then chemicals are used to produce the fumata bianca white smoke, announcing the good news. And since 2005, to avoid any confusion, the bells of St. Peter's Basilica also ring out solemnly to confirm the election alongside the white smoke.
Ah, the bells are a good addition. Smart. So how many votes does a candidate actually need to be elected pope?
They need a qualified majority of 2/3 of the votes. With around 130 electors expected in 2025, that means a candidate would need to secure roughly 87 votes to be elected.
2/3. That's a high bar.
It is. And if, after several rounds of voting, no consensus is reached, the cardinals can agree to pause for a period of reflection, prayer, and discussion, hoping to break the deadlock and, will discern God's will. It's also important to note that the Apostolic Constitution Universi Dominici Gregis made some significant changes. It abolished older, less formal methods of election, like election by acclamation.
Where everyone just shouts a name.
Sort of, yes, spontaneous agreement, and also election by compromise, where a small group might decide on behalf of everyone. So now, the secret ballot, the scrutiny, is the only valid method.
A very deliberate process requiring a strong majority. Now, the question I'm sure everyone's wondering about, who might the candidates be? And what kind of dynamics can we expect in this next conclave?
Right, this is always the most speculative part, but based on the analyses we've looked at, several names are definitely circulating.
Okay.
For example, Inés San Martin, a respected Vatican journalist, thinks it's unlikely the next pope will be Latin American or North American. She leans more towards African candidates, mentioning Cardinal Fridolin and Bongo Basungu from the Tongo, or maybe Cardinal Peter Eber Okpalek from Nigeria.
An African pope. That would certainly reflect the Church's growth in that continent, wouldn't it?
It really would. It's a fascinating possibility.
And what other names are being talked about in Vatican circles?
Well, Edward Penton's analysis, though perhaps needing updates, mentions several figures still considered relevant. There's Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the current Secretary of State. He's Italian, 70 years old, seen as a moderate.
Representing some continuity with Francis.
Potentially, yes, although historically secretaries of state are rarely elected pope. Then there's the Hungarian Cardinal Peter Erdo, 72, considered more conservative, especially on issues like marriage and LGBTQ+ matters, though his media profile seems to have lowered a bit lately.
Okay.
Another major name is Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines. He's 67, seen as progressive, very focused on pastoral inclusivity. He'd be the first Asian pope.
That would be historic.
Absolutely. Though some analysts raise questions about his administrative experience, perhaps, and his relative youth might suggest a potentially very long pontificate.
Right. That's always a factor.
And finally from that list, Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, Italian, 69. He's seen as close to Francis, has an ecumenical focus, very active in diplomacy, known for dialogue, including with LGBTQ+ groups. But his relatively lower public profile might make reaching that two-thirds majority a challenge.
So a really diverse group of profiles there. Any other names we should keep an eye on?
Yes, others get mentioned too. Cardinal Charles Mongbo from Myanmar, 76, known for his pastoral work and human rights advocacy in Asia.
Okay.
And Cardinal Pierbattista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. Italian, only 60, strong diplomatic background, very focused on Christian minorities in the Middle East. He's often seen as a figure of balance.
Younger, too. Interesting.
Definitely. Some Spanish cardinals,
Yeah.
sometimes mentioned Juan Jose Omella, maybe Luis Francisco Ladaria, and Tony Canizares, though perhaps less prominently now.
What about the Argentinian cardinals, given Francis's origins?
Well, despite their numbers now, they don't seem to be among the top favorites. Names like Angelo Sixto Rossi, Mario Aurelio Poli, Vicente Bocalic Iglic are there. And perhaps most notably, Victor Manuel Fernandez, known as Tucho.
Ah, Tucho Fernandez, yes. Close to Francis.
Very close. Seen as quite progressive, though some of his views have generated controversy, which could be a factor within the College of Cardinals.
It seems the big questions facing the cardinals are pretty fundamental then. Are they looking for continuity with Francis's reforms, or perhaps a shift towards a more conservative direction?
Exactly.
Will they prioritize a European pope, or are they truly open to leadership from other parts of the globe? And what qualities will weigh most heavily: pastoral experience, theological stance, or maybe strong administrative and management skills?
Those are precisely the key questions, the unknowns, that the Cardinals will have to grapple with during their deliberations.
Right.
And once they do reach that two-thirds majority, and a cardinal accepts the election, the dean of the College of Cardinals, currently Corelli, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, asks him two crucial questions. Do you accept your canonical election as Supreme Pontiff?
And if he says yes.
And the dean asks, by what name do you wish to be called? Once he accepts and chooses his name, the new pope is taken to be vested in papal robes. Then he's solemnly presented to the world from the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica.
With the famous announcement.
Habemus Papam. We have a pope, announced by the Cardinal Protodeacon. And finally, the new pope gives his very first blessing, Urbi et Orbi, to the city of Rome and to the world.
An incredibly emotional moment steeped in so much history and spiritual significance. The election of a new pope really is a momentous event echoing far beyond the Vatican walls.
It truly is. This upcoming conclave, with its diverse electorate and the weight of centuries of tradition behind it, is just a fascinating process to watch unfold. The decision made within the silence and secrecy of the Sistine Chapel won't just determine the next leader for over 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide. It will also signal the direction the Church intends to take as it navigates the really complex challenges of the 21st century.
It's certainly a delicate balance they need to strike, isn't it?
Yeah.
Honoring Pope Francis's legacy while also addressing the huge range of needs and perspectives within the global Church today.
Absolutely.
Thinking about everything we've discussed, what qualities do you personally think are most crucial for the next pope? It's something for all of us to consider, I suppose. This ancient process keeps evolving, and its outcome is going to shape the spiritual landscape for years, maybe decades, to come. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.